$60 billion. That is the number whispered into the hot Sahel air when Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before the cameras in Ouagadougou. A fortune buried beneath the red earth, vast enough to redraw the map of a nation, and perhaps the continent itself. Yet Africa knows too well that gold can gleam like salvation while carrying the weight of ruin. In Congo, it funded militias. In Niger, uranium lit the streets of Paris while children studied in darkness. In Angola, oil built towers for the few but left villages dry. The question is stark. Will Burkina Faso repeat this tale, or will it become the nation that finally breaks the curse? For the people of Kaya, Gawa, and Bolsa, the discovery feels like a heartbeat racing between fear and pride. For the world, it is another headline, Africa's new gold frontier. But for Traoré, it is a call to arms. This wealth will not slip into foreign banks. Not again. Stay with us. This is not just another story of gold. It is a turning point in Africa's struggle for dignity. Subscribe and walk with us, because this story is not finished. It has only just begun. The morning sun over Ouagadougou was unrelenting, pressing down on a crowd already restless with expectation. The air carried dust, sweat, and the electric charge of history. Then came the words, more than 1,200 tons of gold, valued at over $60 billion, confirmed by the state. Cameras flashed, ministers shifted in their seats, and an entire nation inhaled sharply. A figure on stage, Burkina Faso's Minister of Energy, declared with solemn certainty, for the first time in our history, this wealth will not be siphoned into foreign banks. It will serve the barefoot child in Dori, the farmer in Banfora, the mother in Bobo Dioulasso. The applause thundered through the press hall. Yet outside, beneath corrugated roofs and along the cracked pavements of Ouagadougou, skepticism mingled with awe. In Kaya, a young man leaned against his rusted motorbike, ear pressed to his phone, whispering to his friend, 60 billion, brother. Do you believe it? His friend spat into the dust. We heard the same when Niger struck oil, when Arlit glowed with uranium. Tell me, what changed for the people there? The question hung in the air like smoke, curling into silence. Across the land, the announcement spread like wildfire. Elders in Bolsa gathered under a neem tree, their voices weaving through caution and hope. They say it is ours, one said, but whose trucks will carry it away? Whose banks will it enrich? Another answered bitterly, gold does not glitter for the poor. It blinds them. The circle fell silent, the old wounds of Africa's resource curse reopening with a sting. Inside the presidential palace, Captain Ibrahim Traoré met his ministers with a gaze as sharp as the blade of a hoe. The survey report lay open before him, its numbers heavy as stone. This, he said, striking the paper with his palm, is not a blessing if we repeat the mistakes of the past. We must write a new story. Do you hear me? A new story. Heads nodded, words of assent filled the room, but in their eyes flickered memories of promises broken elsewhere on the continent. The discovery had already reached beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Western newspapers seized the headline. Financial Times branded the country the new gold frontier of Africa, while Bloomberg predicted a tenfold increase in national GDP if properly managed. Requests for exploration licenses began to arrive even before the ink dried on government statements. Canada, the Emirates, Australia. Delegations touched down in Ouagadougou, smiles polished, contracts ready. But the people of Burkina Faso had seen this mirror before. They knew its reflection. Congo, a land of riches drowned in blood. Niger, exporting power while its people lived in darkness. Angola, oil-rich and water-poor. To them, the promise of gold was not only dazzling, it was dangerous. Still, the news stirred something deep within. Pride that the red earth beneath their feet held more than dust. Fear that history might repeat itself. Determination that perhaps this time, with a leader vowing dignity above all, the script might be rewritten. As the sun dipped low over the Sahel, one question lingered in every heart, heavier than the weight of gold itself. Was this fortune a blessing, or the rebirth of Africa's curse? The announcement was still echoing through radios and marketplaces when the second hammer fell. In June 2005, the government declared 5 major gold mines nationalized, transferred to Sopamab, the state-owned mining company. International boardrooms trembled. In Ouagadougou streets, miners raised their helmets high, chanting the captain's name. For the first time in decades, ownership did not mean signatures in Toronto or Dubai. It meant the soil itself answering back. Captain Ibrahim Traoré appeared on national television, the tricolor flag at his back. His voice was not that of a man asking for compromise, but of a leader drawing a line. Better to buy our dignity than to sell our souls cheaply, he thundered, referring to the costly but decisive buyback of the Bangu mine from a Canadian conglomerate. His fist struck the podium. The message was unmistakable. Burkina Faso would no longer kneel. Yet reality struck with the force of tragedy. In April 2025, the Palmer mine collapsed, trapping 17 artisanal miners beneath tons of rock. Mothers wailed, fathers dug with bare hands until their fingers bled, but no life emerged. The captain faced the cameras the next day, his jaw tight, his eyes dark. "No ounce of gold is worth 17 lives," he said. With that, unregulated pits were shut down, and the state vowed to assume control. But the earth carried other warnings. Wells in Kaya turned a reddish hue, the sharp smell of chemicals rising with the buckets. Women looked into the poisoned water and asked, if water itself becomes poison, how do we feed our children? Hospitals in Gawa overflowed with children coughing from dust. The World Health Organization reported a 31% rise in respiratory illnesses within just 8 months. A doctor sighed into a microphone. "The dust is stronger than our medicine." Traore responded with decrees, banning cyanide processing near rivers, allocating emergency funds for health clinics, demanding companies finance clean water projects. "If you take from our soil," he declared, "you must give back to our people." But the question lingered. Could signatures and proclamations keep pace with the damage already seeping into lungs and rivers? Meanwhile, international media sharpened their gaze. Reuters reported on suspended licenses for firms caught funneling profits through offshore accounts. Bloomberg debated whether Traoré's radical policies would deter investors. The Financial Times called him a risk to stability. But in Ouagadougou's market, a woman selling mangoes replied differently. "For the first time, someone speaks as if the gold belongs to us." Students at the University of Ouagadougou debated late into the night. One voice shouted, "He is too radical. He will scare investors away." Another rose. "And what did investors give Niger? Uranium for Paris, darkness for Niamey. Do you want the same fate?" The hall erupted as if the very soul of a generation was on trial. Everywhere, the ghost of Thomas Sankara returned. His words, "He who feeds you controls you," were invoked at rallies, painted on walls, sung by schoolchildren. Traoré himself quoted Sankara before falling silent, letting the weight of history press down on the chamber. By now, the world had joined the chorus. Delegations landed with briefcases, investors whispered of partnership, diplomats hinted at threats. Yet the captain's message was clear. This gold is not theirs. Not this time. His words reverberated not only through Burkina Faso but across a continent long plundered. And still the question swelled, larger than the red horizon of the Sahel. Could one small landlocked nation truly resist the giants of Toronto, Brussels, and Beijing? The weight of $60 billion in buried gold did not fall evenly on the shoulders of Burkina Faso. In Ouagadougou's ministries, it became policy and paperwork. In the villages of Benfora and Kaya, it became dust in the lungs, poisoned wells, and the haunting silence of children who coughed through the night. The government's reforms sought to shift this burden into hope. Yet hope, like ore, is fragile until refined. The creation of a community development fund marked a turning point. 20% of gold profits, Traoré decreed, would flow directly into village councils, managed not by distant ministers but by elders and elected representatives. In Banfora, the debate was heated. Should the money build new wells or a health clinic? In Kaya, women demanded clean energy for their homes. "For once," one farmer said, "the decision is ours, not theirs." The air was thick with pride, but also with doubt. Would local councils resist the temptations of corruption better than central government? Or would gold simply find new hands to grease? At the University of Ouagadougou, Traoré announced scholarships for engineering students. "We will train a generation of Burkinabe metallurgists and geologists. The age of foreign experts exploiting our ignorance ends here." Students cheered, their voices echoing through lecture halls like a promise. Yet outside the campus gates, thousands of young men still search for work, wondering if degrees would feed families faster than pickaxes. Healthcare too bore the scars of mining. With respiratory diseases surging, hospitals overflowed. Doctors begged for equipment, parents begged for medicine. Traoré convened his cabinet at midnight, declaring, "Then we will bring medicine stronger than the dust, even if we cut our own salaries." Funds were redirected, clinics built, and the first state-funded purification plant broke ground. Still, villagers asked a quieter, sharper question. Can clinics replace rivers? Can medicine restore lungs? Meanwhile, corruption shadows loomed large. Reports surfaced of smugglers moving truckloads of ore through Mali and Togo under the cover of night. Our borders leak like sieves, admitted a weary official. Traoré's response was blunt. We fight shadows with light. Within weeks, a special environmental police unit was deployed. Trucks were seized, clandestine pits shut down, smugglers arrested. Contracts were ordered to be published in plain French and Marais, laid bare in newspapers and online. No hidden signatures, no secret percentages, the president declared. The transparency was radical, unsettling both foreign investors and entrenched elites. The struggle was not only material, it was spiritual. Sacred mossy sites, bulldozed to make way for mines, were reclaimed as heritage reserves. Our ancestors are not collateral damage, Traore told a rally in Ouagadougou. The crowd roared, fists lifted, as if to shield centuries of memory with their own bodies. Across the continent, voices began to call Burkina Faso a test case for something larger. Could a nation truly rewrite the script of anti-colonial Africa? Could it turn soil once scarred by plunder into soil seeded with dignity? For every cheer, there was also unease. Investors threatened lawsuits. Neighboring governments muttered about instability. Western analysts dismissed the reforms as reckless. But in the markets of Bobo Dioulasso, a mango seller summed it up simply. Better reckless with dignity than safe in chains. And so the tension tightened, stretched between the promise of sovereignty and the peril of isolation. Villagers asked whether gold would bring bread or bullets, dignity or despair. In the heart of Ouagadougou, a mural appeared overnight, a child holding a golden nugget in one hand and an empty bowl in the other. Its caption asked the question that now haunted an entire nation. Would sovereignty be strong enough to feed both stomachs and souls? The ripples of Burkina Faso's decision did not stop at its borders. In Paris, polished suits whispered in quarters about contracts lost and lights that might dim without uranium from Niger and gold from the Sahel. In Brussels, officials framed their statements with the language of stability, warning that radical reforms might undermine investor confidence. In Washington, analysts spoke of security concerns, slipping phrases like resource nationalism into policy briefings. The tone was cautious, but the implication clear. A small African nation was daring to step outside the script, and that unsettled the established order. Across Africa, reactions were mixed. The African Union praised Ouagadougou's call for transparency, but urged cooperation with international partners. ECOWAS, still reeling from tensions with member states pursuing independent policies, hesitated between condemnation and cautious approval. Some leaders saw Traoré's boldness as dangerous, a spark that could ignite unrest in their own countries. Others quietly admired his defiance, recognizing in it the echoes of their own suppressed ambitions. China's state media, always careful, referred to Burkina Faso as a challenging partner. Behind the careful wording lay a dilemma. Beijing, eager to secure resources, also feared a precedent that could spread across the continent, tightening the terms of every contract. Meanwhile, Canada and Australia lobbied furiously, their mining firms anxious at the sight of suspended licenses and nationalized sites. But not all foreign voices were critical. Among the African diaspora in London, Paris, and New York, forums buzzed with debate. Some hailed Traoré as the torchbearer of a new path, one where dignity replaced dependency. Others feared isolation, sanctions, or even covert destabilization. Still, the phrase African sovereignty appeared again and again, trending across platforms, uniting scattered voices into a chorus that insisted Africa had the right to choose its own destiny. At the United Nations, diplomats couched their warnings in the language of concern for the environment and governance. Yet in Ouagadougou's markets, people read between the lines. When they say governance, one man remarked, they mean control. The laughter that followed was bitter, edged with memory. What startled the world most was not just Burkina Faso's defiance, but the possibility that others might follow. If a landlocked nation, long dismissed as fragile, could nationalize, regulate, and still command loyalty from its people, what would stop Mali, Niger, or even Congo from demanding the same? The world's gaze fixed on Ouagadougou. Investors, diplomats, and power brokers all asked the same question. Would Burkina Faso's gamble collapse under pressure, or would it light a fire that spread across the continent? And beneath it all, the question lingered louder than any headline. Would global powers truly allow Burkina Faso to choose its own destiny? The road ahead stretched like the red earth of the Sahel, uncertain, cracked, but alive with possibility. For Burkina Faso, the discovery of $60 billion worth of gold was not merely a question of economics. It was a question of survival, dignity, and direction. Would this wealth become a seed planted deep in the soil, watered by sweat and guarded by vigilance? Or would it harden into chains binding yet another generation? In the villages, hope took tangible form. Councils debated whether to build clinics or wells first. Young students dreamed of becoming engineers instead of laborers, and mothers whispered prayers that their children might inherit clean water instead of poisoned streams. For them, the promise was simple, that gold would translate into bread on the table, medicine in hospitals, and dignity in daily life. But risk loomed as large as opportunity. Investors hinted at lawsuits, foreign governments murmured of sanctions, and neighboring elites worried about the spread of defiance. If Burkina Faso can nationalize and survive, what stops us from doing the same? Asked a radio caller in Bamako. The question revealed both inspiration and fear, a recognition that the stakes extended far beyond one border. Traoré's government knew the battle was not only external, corruption within, desperation at the margins, and the ceaseless tide of smuggling threatened to erode progress from inside. Gold is temptation, an elder Ngawa warned. Even the honest can lose their way when they see it glitter. To counter this, Traoré pressed forward with reforms, community funds, public contracts, environmental policing, and a demand for local refineries. The message was clear: value must remain where the soil gives it birth. At rallies, Traoré's words grew into chants among the people. Not pity, not charity, sovereignty. His voice carried the weight of a continent's longing, but also the fragility of one man standing against empires. Supporters compared him to Sankara, while skeptics asked whether a single leader could resist the tide of global ambition. For Burkina Faso, the next chapter was unwritten. It could be a harvest where gold became bread, schools, and clean water. Or it could be a wasteland where poisoned rivers and broken promises buried hope beneath the dust. The choice, as Traoré reminded his people, was not only his, it belonged to every hand that tilled the land, every voice that demanded dignity. And so the question that began with a number, 60 billion, evolved into something greater. If one small nation can plant gold as a seed of freedom, what stops the rest of Africa from doing the same? The story of Burkina Faso's gold is more than a headline. It is a mirror reflecting both the scars of the past and the promise of the future. From Congo's blood-stained mines to Niger's uranium-fueled darkness, from Angola's oil-soaked poverty to the poisoned wells of the Sahel, Africa has lived too long under the weight of a curse disguised as wealth. Yet here, in the red earth of Ouagadougou, a question rises once again. Must history always repeat itself, or can it finally be rewritten? Captain Ibrahim Traoré has drawn a line in that dust. He has declared that contracts will be public, that refineries will be built on Burkinabe soil, that community funds will reach the hands of ordinary villagers. His words are not promises of charity, but a call to dignity. The applause of miners, the cheers of students, the prayers of mothers, they are more than echoes. They are a mandate. But the struggle is far from over. Lawsuits, sanctions, and pressure from global capitals will test Burkina Faso's resolve. Smugglers and corruption within may gnaw at its foundations. The question is whether this nation, long overlooked, can stand firm not only for itself, but as a beacon for others. For what is at stake is not simply gold, but the spirit of anti-colonial Africa, a spirit that demands the continent no longer bleed its riches into foreign vaults while its children starve. The answer lies not in one man, but in millions: farmers, miners, students, mothers. If they can hold together, then this experiment may become proof that African sovereignty is not a dream, but a living force. And if Burkina Faso succeeds, then perhaps the seeds planted here will germinate across the continent, breaking chains one by one, harvest by harvest. This is not just about Burkina Faso. It is about a continent standing taller, refusing to bow, daring to believe in its own strength. This is about the dawn of anti-colonial Africa. So I ask you, do you believe gold can be turned into dignity, or will it remain a curse? Leave your thoughts below. Share this story, subscribe, and carry it further, because Africa's future is not written by others. It is written by us, together.